This evening is roll call.
Mayor Christine Melendez,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett, Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Dr. Jones, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Our next item on the agenda is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda with a slight change in the order of our board action tonight. I move that we amend the agenda tonight to reverse the order of items C5 to C4 and C4 to C5.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson. Approving the agenda with as amended. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is approved unanimously as amended. Moving on to item 4, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board, and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. There's not been a meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission since my last update. And on Saturday, the Tree Board had a tree symposium and 52 people attended, so that was a great turnout. Everyone said they would, after survey, they would attend again if there was another one, so that is my Tree Board update.
Okay. Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board, and Poudre River Trail Corridor.
For Parks, Recreation, and Culture, the Recycle Center is scheduled to reopen at the new location on February 27th. The mother statue for Boardwalk Park is almost complete. Some of us got a chance to go to the foundry and look at it, so that'll be installed at the mother feature added to the father and the children at Boardwalk Park, so that'll be an addition. We'll see. No date set yet, but sometime in the spring. That'll be a nice addition to Boardwalk Park.
It's coming Mother's Day weekend.
Is it? Okay.
We decided at the Windsor Historical Society if we can make the dates work.
Perfect. It's a perfect.
Or she is, I should say.
Yeah.
She is coming.
That's the perfect, the maternal feature added on Mother's Day, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then the advisory board and staff are reviewing many of the park policies. This would include like smoking in the parks, around playgrounds, on trails, and so on. So like anything, it'll go through the public process for public comment surveys and things like that. So that's something that'll be happening over the next few months. And then just a note, the CRC, the Community Rec Center is continuing to post some big numbers. President's Day was our second highest day of the year with 1,950 visitors. On the Poudre River Trail, last time I mentioned a little bit about Larimer County was doing some work on the river, on the west side of the river, just on the north side of 392 in the River Bluff area. They're connecting the river to a floodplain. Years ago, the river was straightened out to go under 392. But it's adding the natural bend into the river and reconnecting it to the floodplain, adding some habitats for wildlife, as well as planting a lot of native species of plants and trees and whatnot. Wade Willis from Parks and Recreation also met with Larimer County as I-25 has expanded. The Poudre River Trail will cross the interstate and connect. So the Larimer County is working on the piece between Windsor and Timnath, so eventually that trail would connect, and Fort Collins as well is looking to connect at I-25. So we'll have more information in the April-May timeframe, but they are making progress on gaining access and building that trail down that stretch. So right now you can go over 20 miles all the way to Island Grove and Greeley, and you'll eventually be able to connect into the Fort Collins and Timnath as well. And then the Poudre River Trail, there's a new website. They redid the website. It's very nice. It's poudretrail.org. And you can go out there, you can sign up for quarterly newsletters that has events, trail conditions updates, And you can sign up to get notified if you're a regular trail user when there are closures or detours and things like that, where you can get a message in your mobile device and so on, and give feedback to the trail manager. So that's it.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
I have a few things to report for the chamber. Other than regular monthly business, the chamber heard a presentation from Excel Energy regarding the substation and the plans thereof, explaining to all the businesses what was entailed with that. The chamber continues to grow. There was 15 new businesses that joined the chamber in January alone. So the chamber is continuing to see growth as far as new businesses that come into town that want to be a part of the chamber, as well as we talked about our upcoming events this year that the chamber is sponsoring. One of the big changes, and I think I've mentioned this at one of my previous updates, is the chamber is not going to be providing food other than ice cream sandwiches at what we've previously called the All-Town Barbecue. So that will only be ice cream sandwiches passed out by the chamber this year at our first concert in the park in June.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
No report on the Housing Authority, and the Great Western Trail Authority will be meeting next week from this Thursday. So I will have a report next meeting.
Okay. Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Madam Mayor, quickly on the Planning Commission, they had a fairly small agenda at last Wednesday's meeting, although the Avery substation issue that is on our agenda this evening was discussed. So a reminder that as that public hearing opens, I'll have my disclaimer with respect to my participation in the Planning Commission. The Library Board meets this Thursday, so I have no update from the last meeting other than the selection process for the new members for the Clearview Library District have been proposed, and that is a matter that's to be ratified by this board, I believe, this evening. If there's any questions on that.
Okay. And I have the North Front Range MPO, nothing more to report since my last report. Next meeting is not until the first Thursday in March. Downtown Development Authority did meet last Wednesday. At that meeting, we talked about the backlot development agreement formation. We did have a special meeting on Friday, and we did sign the agreement between the DDA and Brinkman for the American Legion parcel on 4th Street. We talked about the 512 demolition building bidding. We're in the process of that. We're wrapping up the wayfinding project plan. And we did kick off the selection of DHMN as the design group to do what's called a cottage study for some of the different homes and things and what those potentially could grow into the future in the downtown area as well. We are working on that through DOLA, a grant from DOLA and Colorado Main Street. And then we also talked about the possibility of either being the organization behind or working with another entity on a future lodging tax initiative. So I think we'll be talking more about that at our upcoming March meeting as well. Other than that, that concludes my report for the Downtown Development Authority. Moving on then to item 5. Item 5 is public invited to be heard. This is for individuals who are wishing to speak during a non-agenda item. If I call your name, please step forward, state your name and address, and then you will be given your 3-minute time to talk. So there is one party on here, but I think it pertains to an agenda item. So did you wish to wait for that agenda item? Okay. So the only other person then we have this evening is Ann Kling.
Ann Kling, Director of the Clearview Library District, 720 3rd Street in Windsor. First of all, I would like to thank Board Member Sislowski for serving on the interview committee. He gave up two of his Saturdays to interview our 21 candidates. That was a lot of work on his own time, and we appreciate that. And second of all, I would like to invite the board and Madam Mayor to a workshop we're having, Better Angels Workshop, on Saturday, March 23rd from 12 to 3. We've been planning this since October. Better Angels will teach us skills for talking across the political divide. So if nothing else, it'll help you get through that next family gathering when Uncle Stan shows up and has his agenda that he wants to talk to you about. So it teaches you how to listen and to speak respectfully so that you can be productive in your conversations. And here is the flyer. I'll give it to Chris when she passes. Thank you. That is all.
Thank you. Moving on then to item B in our consent calendar. There are 5 items under the consent calendar this evening. Mr. McCarter?
There's just one correction to item B5. Somehow I got it in my head that on that resolution in the 4th recital, it refers to a December 3rd date. I'm not sure where I found that. I was convinced that Ms. Kling told me it was on December 3rd, but that was incorrect. So that reference to December 3rd that appears in the resolution that is in your packets has been deleted, and Ms. Eicher has a corrected resolution for your consideration. I've also been informed by Ms. Kling that the, not quite the last whereas paragraph, makes reference to the library board approving the committee's selections. They have not done that, but they have requested nonetheless that you ratify the interview committee's selections, which are set forth in the resolution. With those clarifications, I would ask for approval of the consent calendar.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the consent calendar as presented from Dr. Jones with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer. All in favor signify with yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar is approved as presented. Moving on to item C, board action this evening. Our first item this evening is a public hearing, a conditional use grant, CUG, for a public utility installation including transmission lines and substations in the residential mixed-use zone district. Thornton Farm 24 annexation. Derek Holscher of Public Service Company of Colorado Xcel Energy is the applicant. This is quasi-judicial. Ms. Berry is going to be giving presentation, and I would ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Baker to open the public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now opened. Ms. Berry.
Yes, thank
Excuse me,
you.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just
Right.
read my
Yes.
disclaimer. Madam Mayor, others present, for the record, I want to point out that I, in my capacity as the town board liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting during which this matter was previously presented. I wish to state that my participation in the Planning Commission proceeding has in no way influenced me in my capacity as a town board member this evening. I will make my decision and cast my vote this evening based solely on the evidence presented during this public hearing. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Ms. Berry.
Thank you. As mentioned, the applicant is Public Service Company of Colorado. They are requesting this conditional use grant for a substation. The town code requires that public utility installation, including transmission lines and substations, obtain a conditional use grant in this kind of zone, this residential zone. I did want to mention that this conditional use grant is taking into account the fence and the height of the structures as well as the use. So conditional use grants are reviewed in accordance with Article 8 of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. The site is located in the northern portion of the town, just northeast of Weld County Road 15 and Weld County Road 76. You may recognize it as a recently annexed Thornton Farm 24 property. It is zoned residential mixed use, or RMU. The other town properties in the vicinity are also the same zoning, RMU. The land uses in the area outside the town limits are a mix of low-density residential and then some agricultural uses. So the site, the larger Thornton Farm Annexation site is approximately 288 acres. It is an agricultural site and it will continue to be an agricultural site except for this substation area. The substation will be on approximately 10 acres of the site. The location is approximately 500 feet from Weld County Road. The facility includes the site and also the overhead transmission lines that run north to the edge of the property line. It's about a half mile within town limits, and then it continues on for about a total of 2 miles. It also includes underground distribution lines along Weld County Road 76, and again, those will be buried, so they will not be visible. So here's the site plan. Zooming in on the 10-acre site, the access road leading up to it, it's approximately 800 feet long. Again, the site's approximately 500 feet from Weld County Road 76. The facilities within that 10-acre site, it will have a perimeter chain link fence of 10 feet tall around the whole perimeter. There is also a detention pond on the south portion of the site, and then landscaping proposed on the southern edge. So here are some elevations. It shows the ground equipment. This ground equipment will be a gray metal, hopefully a tone that's not, that won't produce shine or glare. The ground equipment's proposed to be up to about 35 feet in height. And then there's some interior towers. Those will be about 55 to 75 feet, and then it leads out to the taller transmission towers to the north, which are also gray and metal and between 100 and 135 feet in height. So here are the elevations of, if you're taking a cross-section of it, the top one is the north-south area. So we have, as if you were looking from the east to the west. So it's cut in the section there. It's a little longer on that side. It's about, those sides are about 600 feet long. And then the lower image is as if you were looking from the south to the north, and that is approximately 500 feet in width. So here's an illustration that was done to give you an idea of what the facility will look like. This does not include some of the terrain that's in the area or the landscaping. The landscaping right now is focused on the south end of the site, and it is a combination of some evergreens, a few different species, and also some lower shrubs. So for the conditional use, we look at a number of items. That includes the character and quality of the area, the physical appearance. That includes the building locations. Also look at the parking and traffic impacts, how storm drainage is addressed, if any planting screens are necessary, and just basically the general compatibility of the use in the area. So looking at this, you've heard a little bit of this already, the character and quality of the area. This is a 288 agricultural site. The specific facility site will be located approximately 500 feet from Weld County Road 76, and it is surrounded by a mix of low-density residential and some agricultural uses. The appearance, you just saw the appearance of it, the mix of ground equipment, and then also the transmission towers. There's that 10-foot chain link fence that's on the perimeter of the facility. It also contains the access drive and detention area and landscaping. So in regard to the appropriate location of the building or buildings on site, the site is set back from the road north of the wetlands in the area, outside of the wetland area. This site was chosen in part due to the terrain to the east that will help screen it from the properties to the east of this site, and then also a distance back from the road so it's not located immediately on County Road or Weld County Road 76. And the distance from Weld County Road 13 is about 1,000 feet, and from the north boundary it's about 2,000 feet. Parking and loading and circulation facilities are not proposed. That's not this kind of use. It's just a substation. There will be some traffic generation after construction for maintenance, approximately on a monthly basis, but it'd be one vehicle coming in to make sure everything is operating. The storm drainage is being reviewed with the site plan. And there is a plan in place for hazardous materials. There's none proposed on site, but if there are emergency plans in case something happens on the site with the facility. And then substation and transmission lines, they will be viewable, visible, regardless of where it's located. So general compatibility of the proposed use, it will be visible, it will be different from what's in the area. However, it is a allowed use in the zone, RMU, through the CUG. I did want to note this is a long-term use. It's pretty obvious, but this was not something that will have a term associated with the conditional use grant. Then, in addition, we have some evergreen landscaping to help with the screening of the thing, and there is a potential to add landscaping to the perimeter and/or a wall to the area too. And this comes out of some discussions that were received at the Planning Commission. There were a lot of items discussed at the meeting. Those minutes are in your packets. I didn't mean to go through all of them, but two that had come out include additional screening, whether that is a wall or additional landscaping or both. And some community members provided some examples of walls and example substations in the region, and those are the pictures that you see there. One's with the screening of the landscaping, one has the wall behind it. The other item that was discussed was whether or not the station could move farther back from the road. And the applicant is here tonight to discuss these comments. There was some indication that some of these could be accommodated if the town board felt the need to add them to the conditions. So the notifications were prepared in accordance with the code. Again, the Planning Commission meeting was on the 6th of February of this year. A neighborhood meeting is not required for this proposal, but one was held by the applicant in the fall of 2018. I did want to mention that community concerns and letters of support were both submitted for this project. Those were included in your packet, and then we received a few today as well, and I put those on the dais for you to look at. So the recommendation is, at its February 6, 2019 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the conditional use grant application to the town board as presented with the following conditions. One, that a site plan, including landscaping, is reviewed and approved by staff prior to the construction of the facility, that landscaping is required on the south portion of the property to assist in screening of the facility from vantage points from the south, and that the applicant will obtain all applicable town and state permitting for the facility and for the development operations, including an access permit from the town engineering department and a 10-foot fence, and a permit for the 10-foot fence per the International Building Code requirements. They basically require anything over the 6 to have the building code. So that is the presentation. Staff does request that the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, the staff memorandum and supporting documents, testimony from the public hearing, and the recommendation. And I did want to mention that the applicant does have a short presentation, and he wanted to address the comments about extra screening and or if the site could be moved.
Okay. Are there any specific questions from Ms. Berry before we hear from the applicant?
I just
Dr.
have
Johnson.
one. Did I see in the material that the staff recommended screening on the east and west as well as the south?
Originally, the staff did not require screening on the east or west side. The east side has some terrain that blocked it from the views from the east, and the west was, there was a distance about 1,000 feet, and wouldn't know what addition that screening would do there. So we focused on the south portion of the site. At the public hearing at the Planning Commission, it was discussed whether or not additional screening, landscaping, and or a wall and or a berm be added to all perimeters of the facility.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, but I think you should wait till after hearing.
That might be, well, yeah, let's wait, let's hear from the applicant, unless there's something specific from Ms. Berry that you want clarification at this point. Okay, may the applicant come forward then and present what you wanted to.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Derek Holscher. I'm representing a public service company, Colorado, Xcel Energy. Address is 1800 Larimer Street in Denver, Colorado, 80202. I think Melissa did an excellent job of kind of framing up the project here. I do have some more details here I'd like to maybe get into, and along the way might address some of your questions that you have, but afterwards I'll be available for questions. And we do have various members of the project team here. If there aren't any questions I can answer, we have representatives here that can hopefully address those for you. All right, I was just going to start off with a brief project overview here. We're here obviously because of the substation and the transmission line project. It consists of 3 different components. We have the 10-acre substation site, the 1.5 miles of transmission line that will leave the substation to the north. And then we also have a combination of overhead and underground distribution feeder lines that will be serving the areas surrounding Windsor, Severance, Timnath, and portions of unincorporated Weld and Larimer counties. Here's a quick map that kind of shows the full extent of the project here. This purple line at the top is a Platte River Power Authority transmission line that we're going to be tapping that will provide the power to the substation. And then the multicolor line here coming from the north to the south is the 1.5 miles of transmission line. The green section here is in unincorporated Weld County, which we've already received approval on. The purple midsection here is in town of Severance. They did not have any land use permit requirements, so essentially we have our approvals through them. And then the orange line and the green box here is the portions that are in the town of Windsor, which is the substation and about a third of the transmission line. The yellow line is kind of hard to make out here. That's our access down to County Road 76. And then this purple line is the underground distribution feeders that will be leaving the substation all the way out to County Line Road. A little bit here about the urgency and the need for the project. The current system that we have in this area doesn't have the capability to reliably serve not only the existing growth that we have going on here, but also the additional growth that's anticipated. The Avery substation is also going to be providing backup to 2 other substations we have in the area just outside the growth area, Cobb Lake and Windsor. And over the past 3 years, at least, the demand on the system has been very hard and has caused multiple outages affecting over 8,000 homes and businesses. These are the type of power interruptions that put our residents and other stakeholders at risk, and then also, affects the ability to serve that future growth that we're anticipating. I got a couple of graphs here real quick that kind of go over probably some items that you are well aware of, but this is just a graphic from the U.S. Census that looks at the population for Windsor, Timnath, and Severance. And as you can see there, there's all been a pretty steady increase over the last 5 years. And these figures we pulled from last year, so they may not be completely current, but between all those jurisdictions, the unincorporated counties, Severance, Windsor, and Timnath, we're looking at over 2,200 residential units under development and close to 1,700 residential units under review. Now I'm just going to kind of go into the project timeline. We've been working on this project for quite some time now. This will kind of hit some of the high points along the way. Back in September 2012, we did a little bit of work prior to this, but that was the first open house meeting that we had to kind of set the stage for the project and look at some areas of concern and some possible areas for the substation location. Over the course of time, some time had lapsed, so we ended up having a second open house in 2014 in May. And then shortly after that, the following year, the PUC granted us a certificate of public convenience and necessity, which is essentially something we have to do just about with any of our projects. It goes before the Public Utilities Commission, and they basically deem the projects needed. So we received that in 2015 of May. And then shortly after that, we did further analyze and narrow down some more potential sites based on the public input that we received at those open house meetings. The availability to purchase a site and a multitude of different environmental constraints. Then back in, most recently, as far as open house meetings go, we did one in 2016. We had invited over 600 people, about 37 people showed up that evening. And afterwards, at the meeting, as well as some time just after that, we collected over 180 comments that revealed a preference for siting area number 2, which I'll get into a map here shortly. But to continue on with a little bit of the project timeline, in November of 2017, our negotiations started with the City of Thornton on the 10-acre site on the recently annexed Thornton 24 farm site. In September 28, we did receive our approval from Weld County for about a third of the transmission line. And as I mentioned, the other third in Severance didn't require land use permits. And then in November of 2018, as Melissa mentioned, we did reach out to the representatives of Roth Subdivision and met with those folks. And then just before the end of the year in December, we submitted our land use permits here to the town of Windsor. And then today, obviously, we're seeking approval for this project. We're still in the process of securing our remaining land rights for the project, including for the transmission line easements. We need to obtain construction permits, and then we're anticipating construction beginning in April of 2019 this year, assuming we get the approval this evening. I would also like to mention that we've reached out to about 30 businesses and organizations with a stake in this project, including presentations to the Windsor Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Development Authority, and the Windsor Kiwanis Club. And from these efforts, we've accumulated about just over a dozen letters of support, which were provided in your packets. Now I get into a couple maps here. This is the overarching overlook, I guess, of the service area. This triangle up here in the north, that's our Cobb Lake substation. The one I mentioned that this project will provide backup to. We also have the Windsor substation just outside of town here. And then the site for the new Avery substation is basically in between these two. The theoretical load center is basically right here, and that would be what we call the most ideal place to build the substation. And the site in front of you tonight is just to the east of that. Over the course, in particularly the last 4 years, I would say, we evaluated over 20 different sites, and that's what's shown here on the map. And what we ultimately whittled that down to was 3 areas. These aren't individual sites, but they're kind of larger areas where we could look at sites within those areas. And this is what we had presented at the last open house meeting in 2016. And this area number 2 is the large rectangle here on the side. And that was the area that we received the most support for after the open house meetings. There was a little bit of confusion regarding siting area number 2, which is shown here in blue. The area in yellow is the Thornton property, the 200 plus acres. And then the purple box here is the site that's in front of you tonight. So it's just outside of the siting area 2. When we first approached Thornton, we were looking at a site on this eastern edge of area 2. And with the negotiations and their plans for future development and the constraints that are already on site, we ended up having to push it to the east just a little bit, which is what that purple box is being shown right there. This is a kind of a more detailed site plan laid out on top of the aerial that Melissa showed earlier. Again, the substation site, this blue area is the detention pond that we're proposing for the site, the access road, and then again the underground distribution feeders. Before I go too much further, this is the 500-foot dimension from County Road 76. And there's about another 100 feet here before you get past the detention pond, and then another 50 feet or so before you actually get to any equipment. So we're looking at about 650 feet from the road to any type of substation facilities or equipment. And this is the same photo simulation that Melissa showed in her presentation, giving you an idea of what it looks like from the kind of the southeast portion of the site there on Thornton's property. Now I'd like to kind of get into addressing some of the comments that were brought up at the Planning Commission. I think Melissa touched on a couple of them in her presentation. But like I mentioned, we've spent the last 6 years trying to find a location with the least amount of impact on a minimum number of neighbors that still serves the growing community's needs. We definitely take the considerations for the Planning Commission as well as from the public very seriously as we weigh these interests with the ratepayers and the PUC, like I mentioned before, who watch and regulate the costs that we spend on these types of projects. And we also wanted to balance out the needs and desires of the local community. So one of the issues that was brought up was the wetland. And for reference, I'm going to go back real quick just to the map here. The wetland areas in question here are down to the south. You can kind of see County Road 76 kind of splits it in half. There's a portion on the north and on the south. So I think the concern was more so on the northern side of County Road 76. We did consultation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and although I don't have any documentation from them, I'm working on that. They did kind of come to concurrence that there is no adverse impacts to wildlife because of the substation and its relation to the wetland. Currently, there is agricultural practices going around the wetlands, so it's not what we call a pristine, maybe, wetland. There is activity that's going around it all the time, including these agricultural practices. Main thoroughfare, County Road 76, splits it right in half, so there's traffic along that road that can possibly impact the wetlands. The substation site, the access, and the distribution feeders that we are proposing as part of this were designed to avoid those wetland areas, so we won't have any impacts construction or operationally with those wetlands. There might be some possible temporary impacts to bird activities during construction, and that was also mentioned by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. But after construction, he doesn't see any issues, and all those birds and other wildlife would be returning or stayed there during the duration of construction. And after the construction, we would have just limited access to the substation site, usually inspections once a month. This is just another graphic of the landscape plan that this is actually the second version. Initially, we had just proposed a straight line of trees kind of along the southern edge of the property here. But what we did is listen to some of the comments from staff and from the public and kind of mixed up the plantings there, provided 3 different types of trees and then incorporated some shrubs as well. And for the neighbors to the south, we believe that what we're proposing here, the 30 trees and 19 shrubs, will provide effective screening. But one question that Planning Commission brought up was whether or not we'd be able to add additional landscaping to the south. And I believe we can. We did try to space these out so we had enough room for them to reach full maturity and not be overcrowded, still allow room for that to happen. So I think we do have an opportunity to provide more landscaping along the south here. The minimum plant height that we're proposing right now would be 6 feet. We could go a little higher with that. I do know that the taller the tree is, it's harder to get established. So initially, we're proposing a 6-foot minimum height on those trees. One of the other questions was whether or not berms could provide any additional screening. And as you can see, there's kind of limited space. The dashed line is the property line. This solid line is the substation fence. So we've kind of addressed the south side. The east side, we could put some additional landscaping on, but with the topography to the east, we're thinking maybe about halfway up on the site with landscaping. Otherwise, the berm's just going to be screening the landscaping, so it's kind of defeats the purpose. But definitely something we consider on the east side there. The north side is where the transmission line comes in, and we like to avoid any kind of landscaping near a transmission line due to clearance issues. And then on the western side here, we do have some space for plantings, but I'm sorry, for the berm, but it would be limited in height, so it doesn't provide a whole lot of screening due to the space that we have to work with there. I believe the berms need to be a 3-to-1 slope, so every foot you go up, you need to have 3 feet out. So with the limited space we have there, the berm would not provide much of a screening. And one thing to keep in mind is that, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you, but at some point there's also going to be development on this project that would provide additional screening at some point. Just something to factor in there. Next slide. This just kind of goes over the species that Melissa had shown before. We're showing, I believe, 3 different kinds of trees there: an eastern red cedar, pinyon pines, limber pine, and then the rabbit brush is the shrubs that we're proposing. This next slide kind of shows the topography that I'm talking about here. This is a contour map from our survey, the substation site being here. This is the berm, the existing topography, I should say. With about the middle of the substation, the elevation is 4988, and then the top of the berm is 5012. So we're looking at about a 24-foot screening, just using the existing topography that's on site. One last slide here, just to run through some of the area benefits of the project. Obviously, we talked about the increased reliability, the capacity that will be increased to allow for future growth, which will help the economic plans for the area. It's a long-term location. We don't foresee ever needing another substation in this area for probably on the magnitude of over 50 years. We're permitting the ultimate build-out for the substation, which includes 3 transformers. But the initial build will only have 1 transformer, and then we can add those additional transformers as growth continues. The site is located near the proposed developments, which lessens the exposure of our distribution feeders. Like I mentioned earlier, the majority of the public comments we received did support the area number 2. We are a real property taxpayer, and the site uses no natural gas or other services. So with that, I think I'll close and open it up to any questions you have.
Okay. Questions for either the applicant or Ms. Berry? Mr. Kozlowski?
I do have a number of questions, Mayor. I just wondered, do you want me to do that before the public comment?
Yes. I think we should ask our questions first, and then
Okay.
we'll take public comment.
Okay, thank you. You know, obviously, you all have done a ton of work on this, and I appreciate, you know, all the hard work that you've done. Do we need this substation somewhere in the area? Absolutely. It's hard to argue, you know, needing a reliable grid for everyone. I am troubled, though, with a little bit on the location, and I look at our conditional use standards, and really the first 3 points focus on where it's located. If you could go back a few slides, you have the diagram of the terrain. I think that'll work.
Here you go.
I think that'll kind of work for me. So I struggle with this because I look at it and say, well, item 1, we're supposed to consider the character and quality of the area in which it will be located. Well, the quality currently is mostly agricultural. It's wide open space. There is nothing industrial nearby, and this is unfortunately, I don't envy your need to build something that inherently is not necessarily attractive and it looks industrial. I don't see that.
Is there going to be a question? Because I would caution you, this is the opportunity, we should only be asking questions,
Okay.
not sharing your comments on this portion.
Okay.
But if you have questions, we need to ask these questions, but I would, if you're going to, but I would caution you to share your comment
I guess-
until we get through the public hearing portion.
All right, thank you, Mayor. The question is, just looking at this diagram, it was why this couldn't be moved north, at least, and even avoid that last extension of power line, where you would be tapping into your power lines at the angle. What was preventing you from locating this project further north toward the 45-degree angle?
There's a few different factors in that. We did entertain that idea extensively with the city of Thornton when we were doing our negotiations for the site. And their preference was for this area, essentially, we looked at different configurations throughout almost the entire site. We liked the use of the existing topography to provide screening on the east. As it is right now, the access drive into the substation is much longer than we typically have or would like to have. Due to emergency situations, it makes it more difficult if the weather is bad to, in particular snow, to get back to the substation in an emergency. And then just future, they don't have any right now, but they would like to keep the opportunity open for future development on their property. And this is where they ultimately decided to put the site.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions? Mr. Baker?
Yes, thank you. You talked about serving the growth of the area and Windsor, and it looked like most of the growth would be Timnath. I think over 50% of that numbers you have on your slide would be Timnath. This is serving the growth in Timnath as well as Windsor, correct, in Severance?
Correct, yeah. The whole. larger area, correct? And those figures were just either current or future developments.
Right, so in
That
Windsor,
were-
we have
that
a policy of development paying their own way. So in that same vein, shouldn't new development be impacted most by this facility? I feel like you're putting this right next to existing homes versus putting it in the growth area where the impact is happening.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the theoretical load center, which is essentially the best place to build the substation, is just to the west of this at the intersection of 13 and 76. So once you start moving outside of that area, you start to lose reliability. And to be honest, unfortunately, we can't just put these where we'd like to. There's certain parameters, engineering parameters, and environmental constraints that we look at. And most importantly, in my mind, is the willingness of a landowner to sell property. Like I mentioned, we looked at 20-plus sites, and of those, we didn't come across one person who wanted to work with us. So that's a big factor, but also there's also the engineering components or parameters that kind of limit where we can place facilities like this.
Okay. And I have a question for Mr. McCarter, I think. Up here, we have a letter from the town of Timnath from 2016. Is this part of the record, or can I read something into the record for them?
If it was presented by staff for the record, then it needs to be accepted into the record unless there's an objection. So if there's no objection, then you can receive it into evidence.
Okay, I just want to read a quick portion. And this is from the mayor of Timnath. The town council discussed the 3 locations at their August 9th meeting and prefer that the substation be located east of County Road 1 in Weld County and on the far east side of site number 2 on the attached map. The town prefers route I, or 1, as shown on the attached. This will prevent the lines and the substation from being in the view corridor of most of our new or pending developments. So that was from the town of Timnath, concerned about their existing and future development.
That's just one of the 180 comments that we received from our open house meeting.
Well, I'm sure it was just a function of the most people that showed up. Nobody wants it near their house.
Obviously, yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Just a quick question. Could you kind of, to the east, you talked about the natural elevation. It's kind of hard to read on the map, but could you just review that again and then maybe touch on the elevation for the homes to the south? Are they going to be looking up to it? Is it relatively flat, or are they looking down into this?
Yeah, the natural topography here drains to the north, from the north to the south. So from County Road 76, at least you're kind of looking up at the site. The topography with the berm over here, the elevation of our grading plan about the center of the substation is 4998, and the top of this berm, which is right here, is the 2012 or 2014. So providing that 24 feet of screening.
Okay, thank you.
Dr.
Yeah, I
Jones?
want just to follow on Mr. Sosowski's question, suggesting it be moved straight north. And I guess I didn't understand or maybe hear your response to that. I know it would mean a lot longer access road for you to get in there, correct?
Correct. That's one factor.
But you're actually cutting down on the distance. You'd have to put that overhead line. And it would seem that if Thornton is going to develop that parcel, if this were pushed to the north, it seems like it would open up an area to the south that would be more amenable for them to, I don't know if they want to go residential or whatever they want to put in there, but what was your answer or response to that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not the property owner, but we did negotiate with the city of Thornton for over a year on this very topic, as well as some other language in the body of the agreement. But this was one issue that we did negotiate several months, almost a year, with city of Thornton. And we proposed several options, moving it further north. But at the end of the day, they are the property owner. They have thoughts in their mind of how they want to use the property, and this is what they came up with. I do know that, let me pull up another graphic here for you. Bless you. This might be a good one here. Their plans, assuming that the substation moves forward, is to convert this irrigated agriculture into dry land. They do have other irrigation ditches and canals that serve the property further to the north, and they have existing agricultural leases in place for that, for the use of that. And I think that was a component of their decision too, is to not interfere with those existing uses.
So I just want clarification on what you just said. So, because Thornton owns that entire piece of property. So after a year-long of negotiation, the only location that they would give you in terms of this 288 acres, I believe, is what we see right here.
Correct.
They would not allow you to move the farther north, or, but they restricted you to this particular piece. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr.
Sorry.
Sosowski?
And I guess to that, where you have a certificate of public need, would you have a power of eminent domain should you need it in order to locate critical facilities?
Yes, we do. And that's always a last option for us, obviously. So that's why we always want to find a landowner that's willing to work with us on selling or negotiating for a piece of property, because we want to avoid that eminent domain process.
Of course.
Okay. I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
So I understand kind of the process you went through, but what, so you said you went through a long process, you had lots of other locations. What, at the end of the day, brought you to this particular location of all the other locations that you looked at? Originally, there were a multitude that I think got narrowed down to like 3 or 4, and then you picked this one.
Sure. There was several. One being that it's closest to the load center. It was probably the most reliable site. We had a willing landowner to work with. We didn't have any floodplains, wetlands to deal with. We have the wetland here, but we're avoiding it. Other floodplains, soil conditions. We did do soil borings at some of these other locations and obtain data from the landowners. Transmission line routes were also had constraints associated with them, environmental constraints. This one had the least amount of constraints. It was also the shortest transmission route and impacted the least amount of residents, or some of the high level ones.
Okay. My next 3 questions are for Ms. Berry. So throughout some of the testimony that I read in the packet, it talks about there's an urbanized definition. Can you give the definition of what is referenced in here as to this is a potential urbanized area?
Oh.
What that's referring to in the definition of that?
And it's in one of the
I can't
letters that
point
was.
out to it exactly, but in the packet, time and time again, it references that this location as an urbanized area.
I'm
What
going to
does
start
that
what I
mean,
think
the
that you're talking
definition in our
about. The property is in the town's growth management areas. I'll have to look and see if I can find any specifics.
So does that alone make it define as urbanized, just because it's in the growth management area, or what makes that, what's the definition?
I guess I'd have to look up where this word urbanized is found, so I can get the context of it. I'm assuming it's might be because it is in the growth management area, and that area is seen by the town as an area where growth would occur. That's as close as I can get to answer the question, because I'm not sure
Madam Mayor?
where the urbanized
Okay,
comes
Mr.
from.
Sosowski?
Yeah, sorry.
Can you
The
shed
search-
light?
The search function works.
Oh,
Nice.
And the appearance of that, it's really in the prior decision to annex that area.
Okay.
And it was Mr. McCarter commenting, and he said that the statute states that the area is urbanized or expected to be urbanized.
Are expected to be
That
urbanized,
was-
and that's why, with the growth
Just
management
by the-
area.
Okay,
So,
okay,
with an
because it's in the
annexation.
growth management area, there is that expectation.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sosowski. And then about the chain link fence. So has there been a determination that we can go above and beyond the chain link fence? I mean, or is it still gonna be chain link?
The proposal by the applicant is for a 10-foot chain link fence, but the applicant indicated, at least at the planning commission meeting, that they would consider other screening devices such as a wall or other use.
So I heard time and time again that there would be this consideration for additional screening, additional landscaping, but at what point or what do we need to do to make it an absolute assurance if we were to move forward, because instead of just a consideration?
It's recommended that it be included in the action, added to one of the numbers, that it's a requirement.
Okay, and the applicant would be agreeable to those terms if we wanted to have something that would have more assurance about either the landscaping or the actual screening? Mr. McCarter?
If that's for the record, I think we need the applicant to say
Okay.
that from the lectern, just to make certain that it's in the record.
Okay.
Yes, and this is kind of typical, almost from a lot of the developments we do, substation-wise, transmission lines. The jurisdiction will impose conditions of approval as part, and then we are required to adhere to those, and we're open to that.
And we would do that in our next action item after the public hearing?
Right, that's right. You would, if you consider it, if you want to approve it, you could approve it with conditions as long as there's support for it up and down.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Kozlowski?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As long as you're still at the podium, sir. There were really two questions. Looking through your application, it referenced an August 16th meeting. I assume meeting with the public, and it said at that time Area 2 was a preference. And fortunately, this map is up, so the blue box is Area 2, right? So at least as of August 16th, I think, actually, I'm not sure the year of that.
I think it was 2016, I
In
believe.
2016?
Yeah.
That area was selected, and then the purple box obviously is where you ended up. I'm curious how that moved. And then second with that, your application says in November of 2018. I assume by that time it must have moved, because you then met with the Roth subdivision, of course, the area directly south of it.
Right.
How did it move, and then what was the result of that meeting on November of 18?
Yeah, this was the Area 2 that was presented at the open house meeting in 2016. And once we received the majority of support for that site, that's when we approached City of Thornton to work at locating a substation site in this portion that would be on their property. Once we started negotiations with Thornton, we saw that that was not becoming a possibility. They do have the existing drainage here, or irrigation canal. There were also other concerns that they had. So that's when we started looking at other locations on their property outside of Area 2. We tried to keep it as close as we could to the eastern edge of Area 2. But this is what we landed on after our negotiations with the city.
And then November of 18, when you met with the Roth subdivision?
That's when we essentially had kind of almost gotten to the tail end of our negotiations with City of Thornton and had something more concrete to share, knowing that we were going to be in this location, more tied down to this location.
Okay, are there any further questions? Mr. McCarter?
It's unusual for me to ask questions of the applicant, Madam Mayor, but is it possible to enlarge this image that you're showing here, sir? So that we can dial into the upper, what would be the northwest corner of your purple box?
Sure.
And perhaps that one's good enough.
This is what's coming to mind off that, so more, I don't know.
You mentioned a moment ago that in the blue box to the left of your purple box, there was an irrigation canal. Is that irrigation canal running from east to west and then turning up just past the northwest corner of your purple box?
Correct, yeah.
And then the irrigation canal continues north-northeast, correct?
Yeah, there we go. That's a,
And is the irrigation canal then turning back into the property toward the purple box from the east-northeast?
yeah, I believe that, the canal is fed from the northern end up here, and
Okay.
it runs down here. We just skirt the outside of it, and then it continues east, and I believe it branches off here. There's another canal that comes from the north, and then to the south here. So it's all kind of interconnected.
Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the board, we will open this to the public hearing. As I recognize you, you may step forward to the podium. You need to cite your name and address for the record. We'll turn on the light. You have 3 minutes to speak. I would just ask that as you're going through the process, if you continue to hear somebody who's already shared what you similarly want to say, you might just say that you agree with the participant or who stated whatever came before you. So this is the public invited to be heard, so you may step forward.
Good evening, Eric Van Oy, 36925 Galen Avenue. I'm right across the street in the Ross subdivision. I would request that this get put on hold because in my opinion and some others, this has been dealt with very deceptively. As was mentioned in 2016 when the public meetings were conducted, everything was in area number 2. It wasn't till just last fall that this area came up. For me personally, I live just about straight across south from this. I was not concerned when it was in area 2, but all of a sudden it shows up straight across from my house. It seems like from what public service is saying, Thornton is restricting them, but it's also miraculously working out to their benefit. The road's the right length, it's exactly where they want it. My recommendation is force them to push this north. That irrigation ditch that you see that their northwest corner touches, that's a concrete irrigation ditch that hasn't been used in years. I was up there today, it's caving in. That farmer is using the white plastic irrigation tubing, which can be moved just about anywhere. Public Service did not close on this piece of property till 10/10/18, yet they just said that at their meeting with some of the residents of Roth, which was a very limited meeting, that they didn't have this pinned down, yet it was closed on, according to the county, 10/10/18 for a cost of $400,000. They don't have the property or the area to add more around it. I'm sorry they didn't buy more, but that shouldn't be our issue. The picture that you saw earlier that showed it from the road, that's almost looking right off of my property. The trees along the front will help, but it needs something along the side. I would respectfully request that you force them to push this thing to the north. They have the ability to condemn the property and get it from Thornton if they choose to. They don't want to go through that. We are the ones that are going to pay the price. Nobody else wants to look at this. We have no other advocates. Nobody else to stand up for this. Area number 2 is right across from the Ridge at Harmony subdivision. I can only guess why it didn't go there, because that construction company, those developers probably were not going to tolerate it. So if there's anything you could do to help, we would certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Marcia Maeda, 6711 Stevens Street, Windsor, a 2-acre property in Ross subdivision, 887 feet directly south of the proposed substation. We don't live in the town, but we worked in Windsor. We share schools, the library, fire protection, goods and services available here. We are part of your community. We chose our lot because of its proximity to the park with its pond below us and the fields beyond. We've lived there since 1973. Our quiet, leafy location is enviable. Windsor's strategic plan calls for the purchase of open space, reflecting residents' desire for nature close to home. The stretch of Weld County Road 76 that passes the proposed substation site offers restful vistas and bird life in the wetland, all for free. A most desirable place in the Windsor community will become one of the ugliest, vying with gas and oil pads. Ross subdivision's low density has become a target. Harmony Ridge backs up to our western neighbors with no buffer zone. A tourist attraction nearly landed on our eastern border. 47 oil wells are coming to our east. We chose to live on larger properties because we like the lifestyles allowed there. not to attract by our small numbers an aggressive public utility seeking the path of least resistance. A satellite view shows lots of open land, but that is all private property plus a park holding part of the wetland. Xcel's application claims that the preferred substation location and transmission route were selected after presenting siting options to stakeholders at an August 2016 open house. Those 130 comments out of 180 favoring the site far east of the Timnath were garnered by the Timnath town government. Mr. Baker alluded to one of those messages from the Timnath town government. Roth residents received the invitation, but the current site was not offered as a possibility. Stakeholders in Roth, the most impacted, and the yet unbuilt Harmony Ridge were left out of that process. The neighborhood meeting referred to by the staff was limited to a few residents by the noisy restaurant Xcel chose. 2 business owners told us that the Xcel presentation at the DDA meeting did not clarify the location of the site. One business owner thought it was in the city of Thornton. Both said they wouldn't have voted to endorse it if they had known where it was. We all agree that the power system needs an upgrade, but this is not the place. If it needs to be on the Thornton farm, the northwest corner would be closer to new development, or move it back to Timnath, Xcel's original choice. Mr. Holscher says the project is behind schedule, but don't let that push you to a hasty decision. Xcel started the site process late, not taking advantage of land for sale during the recession. Please deny the application tonight or table it until independent investigation determines if rejected sites are verifiably incompatible, until the mayor and board members can fully understand the site with a visit, and until all ethical and protocol issues have been resolved. Thank you.
Okay. You. Oh, well, lady in the purple, and then you in the tie.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing us out. First of all, I'd like to know that I had a conversation with Scott Twombly. He's the real estate manager. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you please state your
Yes,
name and address?
Lori Langhorn, and I lived at 6855 Stevens Street in Windsor, Colorado for 30 years. I had a conversation with Scott Twombly. He's the real estate manager for Thornton Farms. He told me, I'm sorry I don't have, wish I had a letter from him. He told me that they fought against having this substation anywhere on their property. Their hand was forced to sell at the threat of property condemnation. My home overlooks, I'm directly to the south of the wetland. We're on a slight incline. My home overlooks the wetland area to the north and the farmland beyond, as do many of my other longtime neighbors. Those of us who live in the Roth subdivision have poured our lives into our homes and properties for up to 30, 40, even 47 years. We come before you to beg you to consider our plight. We have no advocate and no representation. You folks, you are our only hope of bringing sanity to what for us is an unbearable and heartbreaking situation. The wildlife and agriculture that coexist with the wetland are what draws people to stop and enjoy the sights that we relish. It's a haven for many species of birds, including hawks, eagles, blue heron cranes, and pelicans. You can see baby ducks and geese on the pond in the spring, hear the frogs and toads singing on summer nights, fox, raccoons, skunks. I, for one, have lived to learn to coexist with skunks. Huge flocks of geese resting in the field in spring and fall, even the beauty of flocks of sheep grazing through the harvested cornfield in late fall. It is a beauty and natural wonder we have enjoyed for decades. If this site is to be used for a substation with its tangle of metal structures, cables, and 10-foot chain link fencing, it will be a disgrace and an injustice to those of us who live here. The substation has been forced upon us with no consideration to our lives and property values. There are miles and miles of undeveloped land all around us. Surely there are other options that don't disrupt the lives and property of nearby residents, and we beg you to deny the use of this particular site when there are numerous alternatives. At the very least, we ask you to table this decision until all other possibilities are considered. Thank you for your time.
Got dressed up for you. Good afternoon, Council, Manager Hale. My name is Rich Werner. I work for Upstate Colorado Economic Development, 821 7th Street in Greeley. And I appreciate the comments that we've already heard from residents, as I am too a resident of Windsor myself. I want to take a little bit of a different perspective on this proposal. As I'm familiar with a lot of the plight of the utilities and the problems that Northern Colorado is consistently seeing on a regular basis as we grow, and that growth is going to continue. Xcel's been working with communities such as Windsor to invest into much long overdue, with all due respect, and much needed improvements into the grid. The Avery substation is just part of the network plan changes that affect major distribution across this area. There have been challenges in the not too distant past with outages, and we saw just one little bullet, I think, in the presentation about outages. When you do not have the redundancy needed, talk to some of your neighbors down the street. I was just having a meeting with officials in Eaton who were suffering from outages on a regular basis every summer. That means businesses shut down, the recreation centers shut down, houses go without air conditioning, and you lose, and the economy suffers from that. As you know, Windsor's population has grown and will continue to grow, and as a resident myself, I think the need to support this infrastructure that can accommodate additional business and residential growth is an absolute necessity. As part of these system-wide improvements, Xcel is investing on an extensive distribution system and upgrades throughout the area. This will create a smarter and more efficient system, and these upgrades will improve the connectivity and absolute need for redundancy going forward. This is an investment in the town's long-term electric needs, and it'll significantly help reduce and protect against potential power outages and strengthen the system overall. And I thank you for your time.
I'm Joan Glayback, 37076 Soaring Eagle Circle, Severance. My sport is bird watching, and I have been a member of Fort Collins Audubon for many years. I have birded the wetlands on County Road 76 for over 20 years. In that time, I have seen birds lose a lot of habitat in other locations, and I fear this is going to happen on County Road 76. We moved to Colorado in 1971 and moved from Fort Collins to Soaring Eagle Ranch 10 years ago. We observed birds on Windsor Reservoir from our home. We use County Road 76 frequently and enjoy that more rural route for now, as opposed to what is happening on Harmony Road. No one has provided us habitat for our sport, as they have bike lanes, soccer fields, etc. for other sports. Our sports habitat is being taken away from us. Another bird-related sport also happens in this area, goose hunting. The Severance-Windsor area has been big in goose hunting for many generations. The goose hunters are also quickly losing habitat for their sport. Locating a substation anywhere near the wetlands on County Road 76 is a deep concern. Many birds from Windsor Reservoir fly over that area daily on their way to and from Timnath Reservoir. We have observed cormorants, geese, eagles, great blue herons, ducks, pelicans, and sandhill cranes doing this. Tall wires or structures are a big danger for large birds. Transmission lines are strung 3 deep on towers reaching 100 to 135 feet tall. District Ranger Troy Florian has told a neighbor that great blue herons already get caught in transmission lines 2 miles north of this location. We get sandhill cranes through here in the spring and fall. We fear they too will be caught. Thousands of geese graze in these fields. As bird watchers, we love seeing them take off in huge numbers. We don't want to lose them. Please do everything possible to protect the wetlands on County Road 76. There are not enough of them in the area, and they attract many bird species that do not go elsewhere in this area. I am asking the Windsor Town Board to please refuse XL permission to use this site for the substation. Thank you.
She's getting the video ready for me. I'm going to talk while it's on. I'm Vicki Lake, and I live in I own property in Northwest Estates. Since 1993, we owned 3 properties there and sold 2 of them, and I still have one about less than a quarter of a mile from this area. And my favorite drive is through this wetlands because you're not driving against or beside it, you're driving through it. It's on both sides, and as you can see, this is their home. This is, I'm afraid there's going to be a big mistake here. And we need to look at this responsibly, and we need to not make these mistakes that can't be fixed later. And someone said that they were talking about putting the grid next to I-25. Well, we've already invaded the nature space there. That's a better place, but this place is pristine. It's already the home of our wildlife. We need to be morally responsible and take care of this area. And so I'm hoping that you choose a different site. If for some reason you can't, then push it as far north where people haven't already purchased, and when they build, they can choose whether they want to live by this or not. And I disagree with the gentleman that spoke, or I agree with him. XL probably needs this grid, but not here. It's a mistake. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Heinck, and I reside at 37124 Cullison Ridge Road in Severance. And I'm here to read a letter to you from John Schnott, who is the president of the Fort Collins Audubon Society. Dear Windsor Town Board, I'm writing about the proposed Excel Avery substation on behalf of Fort Collins Audubon Society, an organization which I currently serve as president. Despite our name, we have members throughout Larimer County and in parts of Weld County, including Windsor, Timleth, Greeley, and Severance. Several of my members have expressed concern about the potential impacts of a substation and the associated transmission lines on birds, especially raptors, waterfowl, and wading birds. Bald eagles, great blue herons, and several species of hawks and falcons are routinely seen in and around the fields where the substation is proposed. Burrowing owls nested in a field just west of the proposed site last summer. The proposed site may seem like just another field in Weld County, but it sits between 2 large bodies of water, Timnath Reservoir and Windsor Reservoir. Based on data from eBird, which is one of the world's biggest citizen science projects, Timnath Reservoir has the third highest diversity of bird species in Larimer County, and Windsor Reservoir is in the top 20 for Weld County. Nearly 250 species of birds have been seen within 2 miles of this proposed substation. We hope the Windsor Town Board appreciates that the area in question is very special with regard to birds. Obviously, Fort Collins Audubon members also benefit from safe, reliable, affordable electric service provided by Xcel and other northern Colorado utilities. We're not opposed to building necessary infrastructure to support human needs. We simply ask that the Windsor Town Board to make sure that all feasible sites for this substation are considered fully explored, and that the potential impacts on birds and other wildlife are considered for each site before any approvals are granted. We suspect that alternative sites could potentially pose far lower risks to avian populations. But if the proposed site proves to be the best available option, we would urge the town to impose conditions on Xcel to prevent and mitigate wildlife impacts to the greatest extent possible, and also impacts during construction. Thank you.
Terry Vanoy, 36925 Galen Avenue. I've lived in this area for, Windsor for 40 years, in this area for 30 in Ross subdivision, and we are due south of where the proposed site is. And after hearing a lot of testimony, of course, it's very passionate from the people who live in Northwest subdivision as well as Ross subdivision. And it's, when I was listening to Xcel, and I 100% agree, we need a new grid. We have been affected by outages as well. But I was looking at their presentation and I saw the words standards and requirements. Low density, which is referring to us in Northwest. Compatibility. When you think of those things, that doesn't take into account the human element that you are looking at, as well as what we've heard about the bird population and all that sort of thing. It's extremely important to look at that human piece of the people who have been out there for 30 and 40 years. If it's possible for Xcel even to move that north some degree. When you look at the topography, because they were showing to the east, yeah, there is a berm. We've lived out there for 30 years and we've ridden our horses out there. But from where Ross subdivision sits, it is looking straight up at probably the highest part of what would be the substation. But to move it back north, even if we could move it north 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet, I don't know how it would affect the bird population, but it would definitely affect the population of people that are to the south, because the way the topography is, then the station would be a little bit more to the back. Northwest wouldn't see it as much, neither would Windsor. Northwest is given 1,000 feet leniency. County Road 13 to the east is given 2,000 feet. From Ross subdivision, it's 500 feet. So again, I just petition you people, please, to postpone it at least till we can talk a little bit more about the ramifications. Or maybe we can develop some sort of advisory committee of the residents of Ross subdivision or Northwest and Severance, whoever it would take, to try to mitigate this and try to have a little bit of compromise into what's going on that's going to affect our lives. Thank you.
Rosalind Leoto, 36933 County Road 15. Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. My husband and I have lived in our home since 1978 and 86 respectively. Our home was built board by board and brick by my husband. We can understand the need for a substation in this rapidly growing area, but we do not feel it is ethical or the right thing to do in placing it across from Roth subdivision. Many of the residents of Roth are original owners and have put a lot of time and effort into the property. County Road 76 has always been a nice scenic road with nice views of the established homes, wetlands, mountains, and Timnath Reservoir. When I first heard about the Avery substation at the Excel open house, I was told by an Excel employee that the site by I-25 was their preferred site, and that is what Excel was planning on using. They held the open house for feedback, but he said the site by I-25 was the preferred site. It seemed like a good option for a substation. Now the site has been staked a few months ago at a location 1,000 feet from my home. The current site has not gone through the public open house format in order to gain feedback on the site. If you notice in your packet, there are multiple maps showing alternatives comparing one site to another. The site in question has never been analyzed in comparison to any of the other alternatives. As a landscape architect, I have researched for an analysis of the site compared to another site on a map, and I am unable to find one on any analysis on the Excel, Thornton, or Windsor website which compares this site to any of the other 20 sites. Government agencies are required to go through an entire visual analysis of their sites to analyze the impact on the area, whether it is in a person's foreground, middle ground, or background. A visual analysis is not just taking an illustration of the facility and placing it on a drawing. In this situation, the site should have been analyzed so the roads and homes in the area would have their views of the proposed substation analyzed. Where is the visual analysis? This massive project has progressed from an analysis of various other sites, sounds like 20 other sites, without this site ever being analyzed and compared to the other sites. And now we have it staked in the field, site plan, real estate transactions. Please make sure you have had adequate time to review all the maps in question before you vote on this critical issue. I would like to ask the board to decline the request for the conditional use grant until further analysis has been completed for this site and re-examine the original preferred site by I-25 and hopefully relocate to a more appropriate area. I have also compiled a list of conditions related to landscape architecture with walls and screening that I would like to give to you for consideration for placing some conditions.
You can have
Thank you.
those to our clerk. This side. Rich?
Thanks for having me. I'm Mike Mitchell, 6771 Stephen, Windsor, Colorado. I moved there in '83, which is about 35 years, and I'm directly south of the purple box as it's currently drawn. And hopefully we can, a couple reasons why maybe we could postpone, table this, or whatever else. The first one is, it's just 10 acres, and we got 288 to play with, and we had to land it right there. I mean, I've heard some reasons why, but none of them just, 10 acres isn't much. It's 1/28 of about 288. And Mr. Baker brought this up too. The new subdivisions should share in all this wealth too. So if we could just take the little purple box and shove it down more to the west and put it down there by County Road 13, that everybody could enjoy in this deal and share likewise. And finally, I was at the November meeting with Excel when we had one in Windsor, and and Mr. Van Oy was right, we were led to believe that everything was on the table, that Thornton was in on the deal, but turned out that November meeting, they had already bought this piece of ground in October. And I feel deceived on that one. And that's it. So hopefully you can take all this into account. And thank you very much for your time. Bye.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board?
My name is Ruth Conley. I'm at 5898 Chantry Drive, Windsor. And listening to everybody speak, the concern that I have is the cancer risk. I work in oncology here in Fort Collins, and there is not complete proven evidence, but there is suggested evidence that these high power lines emit these radiation fields that do cause over time, high exposure. And given the evidence that is identified with the migration of birds, this is something that's going to be there permanently. And so the emittance of this radiation that is going to be there permanently is really something to consider as far as placing this field. And I would encourage the board to look into that a little further also. Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Ronald Maeda, 6711 Stevens Street. I'd like to greet the Mayor of Windsor and to the board. I'm objecting to the location of the substation for many reasons, but the view of it is one of the most important to me. A row of trees wouldn't hide 75-foot structures, including corn or estate. Masking landscape is worthless. The staff has found compatibility within our neighborhood a challenge, but we're facing the challenge every day. A distance of 887 feet will not make this land disappear. Stevens Street is on a hill, and our story-and-a-half homes and a property elevated above Road 76. Our view tops the 6-foot fence that extends for 2 miles all the way to the Road 14, as you can see this. Our view tops our 6-foot fence and extends all the way past the substation and the north view of our home. My main concern is, however, the substation transmission line will affect the thousands of birds flying over the Thornton farm or stop in the wetlands, rest, and breed. Please deny this CUE application, but if you allow it, please add these conditions: that construction take place between November and April to avoid migration and nesting season, that the wetlands continue to be supplied with enough runoff, the Excel purchase and the plant landscape for the neighborhood privacy at our owner's request. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. Heather Best, 6664 Stevens Street. I haven't lived in the Roth subdivision as long as these guys. In fact, we moved out there just a little over a year ago in November. One of the reasons we moved out there was the pristine area, just the beautiful, the wetland and the lakes and everything that's around it. I have 4 little girls that I moved into this house in this neighborhood, and a huge concern to mine is the health risks involved in this. There is the risk of the EMF, and though there isn't the proven evidence that it does cause cancer, there is a lot of suggested evidence, and it also suggests a lot of childhood leukemia. I have a 1-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 10-year-old. We would have not moved there had this been coming to our area. That is a huge, huge concern for me and my husband and our kids. We also realize that if this happens, our property value could possibly plummet. It could go down as much as 30%. Additionally, I work for the National Park Service, and I work for the Environmental Quality Division. And my sole job is to look at the damage and the damage that it causes when things are built and when things happen to the environment, what it does to the ecosystem. I'm well aware of the environmental impacts that this may cause and that it has the potential for doing, and I just please urge you to take another look and to consider another site, because this is just not the right location for it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Okay. Did the applicant want to step forward, and did you have anything further you wanted to say after you heard it? Lots of the comments?
Excuse me, yeah, I'd like to, address some of the comments, concerns brought by the public here today. And if I forget any or I skip over any, please let me know and I can try and address those as well. I think a couple different instances, it was referenced that we've closed on this property. That is not correct. We have a purchase and sale agreement in place with the City of Thornton. It's contingent on approval of the project. Assuming we get approval on the project, we can move forward with closing on the substation. But right now, we just have a purchase and sale agreement in place with Thornton. There was reference in talking with Scott Twombly with the City of Thornton. He's the gentleman that we've been working with over a year now on these negotiations. We never did once threaten condemnation with them. They were not forced to have this site on them. They did say that as long as you have as long as you've looked at all the other sites and don't have any other choices, then we'd be willing to work with you, and that's where we're at. We didn't find any other suitable sites or sites that were being willing landowners, so that's when we approached City of Thornton. And had they not been willing to work with us, they could have denied the purchase and sale agreement. So, loss of habitat with the birds, as we mentioned, we did some consultation with Parks and Wildlife. It was in agreement that there would be no loss of habitat, no impacts to wildlife based on what we are proposing. We are not doing any direct damage to the wetland and will not be as part of the construction process. There was a site near I-25 that we did review and presented with the open house meeting, but we never did say that was our preferred site. That's why we do the open house meetings. We don't have a preferred site at that time. These are the options that we have, and then we solicit public comment and then make our decisions based on those comments. We did not identify any bird's nests in the area of the project. And that was true with the consultation we did with Troy Flooring of the Parks and Wildlife Department. Like they said, there might be some temporary disruption during construction, but long-term effects, there'll be no loss of habitat and the birds will continue to thrive there. There's the talk about moving the site further north. I think we've exhausted that one, that we kind of landed on the space after negotiations with the City of Thornton. If you do move it back, though, if that was even a possibility, it's still sloping up. You're still going to be seeing the site. It's just slightly further back. With the topography out there, you're still going to be looking up at it. There was a couple mentions here towards the end about health risks and the EMF associated with these facilities. That's something we take very seriously, as well as the Public Utilities Commission. When we get our certificate of public convenience and necessity, part of the review that the PUC does is they review the modeling that we prepare for the EMF levels associated with the transmission line and the substation. And we are far below the state guidelines for those levels. I think at the edge of the right-of-way, we're in like the 10 milligauss range. I believe the state standards, don't quote me on this, I believe is up to the 200 milligauss range. There is EMF obviously associated with these facilities. And with transmission lines in particular, you do get those effects when you're standing directly beneath it. That's the highest level you're going to get. And even then, it's still below state statutes. But as soon as you start moving away from that center of field, same with the substations, the levels drop dramatically. We're probably getting more EMF exposure sitting in this room than we are where these folks will be located in their facilities. There is studies that go kind of back and forth on that issue, but there's no concrete evidence one way or the other on that. We do have these types of facilities even in more dense residential developments. We have homes that are right up against substation sites, so this is not something new. We're used to the visual impact obviously associated with these substations, so we're willing to work with the residents and with the town board here on what we can do feasibly to screen this the best that we can. Unless there was something else, that's the comments I had down.
Are there any additional final questions from the board? I had a couple. There was a mention of some kind of an analysis for the impacts. Was there an analysis to the impacts for this selection or any of the others done?
Correct. We did do a siting study for all the 3 alternatives that we presented at the open house. And then when we did end up having to move the site further east out of Area 2, we did the same kind of analysis for that site. It's only about 500 feet east of that Area 2, so we did consider that as part of our siting study.
And then, so you've obviously heard many of the comments about farther north. Is there any consideration that that could possibly happen?
I would say no at this time. Like I said, that was ultimately a property owner decision. We petitioned hard as we could to relocate on their property. I know they have over 200 acres to work with, but they only had this area that after we did our negotiations, this came down to this area. We could revisit it maybe with the city of Thornton, but the last discussion I had with them was that they were set on this location. They weren't going to entertain any other site than the 10 acres we're in front of you today about.
And then I don't know if you can answer this question, and I don't know if anybody can, but is not the Corps of Engineers involved in this wetlands issue and what they have had to have approved of this for the wetlands? I know that they're heavily involved in the NISP project.
Right.
We do.
So-
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So is there a record of decision on any of this? or-
Normally the Corps, if you are removing wetlands, they get involved, but I think they're outside of the wetlands, so it wouldn't
Okay.
be.
So the consideration is because there's no disruption. I mean, there's anticipated no disruption to the wetlands with this. Is that why they're not? part of
Correct.
this?
Even if temporary or permanent, if there's any kind of temporary disturbance, we get the Corps involved. Same with any kind of permanent disturbance. But with the operation of the facility and the construction of the facility, we'll be steering clear of the wetland area.
Okay. Are there any final questions from the board? Seeing none, then I would seek a motion. Mr. McCarter, we have everything we need for the record?
I just want to make certain that the applicant has offered everything he's prepared to offer, and that if anyone else wants anything in the record, now's the time to do it.
Okay.
Mr. Carter? Sorry.
Oh, Mr.
Ma'am.
Sosowski?
I'm sorry, no, I was just.
Oh, okay. You had something additional you wish to add? Okay, please step forward.
Eric Benoit again. The comment he made about moving that to the north, that it slopes uphill, is absolutely not true. Where they're putting this is almost, so there's a hill over to the right you saw, to the east. Where this is sitting is almost at the top of a berm, a hill, and then it tapers off past that down the other side. Moving this back over that hill would drop it in its perspective greatly. So I absolutely disagree. Thank you.
Okay, and
We keep on talking about moving it. I'm Wayne Gross.
would you wait till you get to the podium, please, or the mic won't pick you up?
Wayne Gross, 37299 Lee Lake Avenue. We keep on talking about moving it to the north. How about talking about moving it back to the west in the blue section that is originally agreed upon? I know what the representative said, but if Thornton is not going to negotiate to the north, push it back to the desired site of number 2. That's my thought.
Did you wish to address any of
I think it comes back to the discussion earlier about moving it north. This is where Thornton wants it. I think we negotiated for the blue area, Area 2. That was the first area we approached the city with and got shot down there. So I think anywhere outside of the 10 acres we're looking at tonight, they're not willing to work with us.
Okay. Anything further from the board? If not, we are going to close the public hearing. We've already allowed, unless you have something new or different to add, if it's just something that we've already heard. You have something new?
I would just like to say, why aren't we getting the town of Thornton in here? I keep hearing that this is what they're saying and this is what they're doing, but they're never represented.
An invitation for this town board hearing, as well as the planning commission, was forwarded to our representative at City of Thornton. I'm guessing they declined not to attend, or something else came up.
Okay. Anything final from the board? Okay, now this completes our record. Okay, then I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with with Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Dr. Jones to close public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 2, the conditional use grant, CUG, for a public utility installation, including transmission lines and substations in the residential mixed-use zone district, Thornton Farm 24 annexation. Derek Holscher of Public Service Company of Colorado is the Xcel Energy applicant. Quasi judicial, Ms. Berry, anything further for the record? No. Okay. Anything further from town board? Mr. Sosowski.
May I make my statements now?
You
I
may
guess?
make your statement.
Thank you. Thank you. As I'm starting to say earlier, obviously, I'm not going to argue at all with the need for additional infrastructure in the power grid. I think everyone would agree to that. I think there's tons of supporting documentation in our files to that extent. I am, though, extremely troubled by the first 3 points that we're required to examine with respect to granting a conditional use grant. The character and quality of the area, I don't feel is consistent at all with this particular application. Physical appearance and use, suitability of the architecture and landscaping, I don't think you could in any way see the design of this particular building to be consistent with the surrounding area. And finally, appropriate location of the buildings on the lot. I think the comments about there being 10 acres within a 280-acre site feel valid to me. I think the response to that has simply been that Thornton has not been willing to cooperate in any way to locate it elsewhere. I'm not feeling compelled that other alternatives are not available that would be more consistent with this particular region, as opposed to 800 feet from an existing development.
Okay. Dr. Jones.
Well, I get it. I mean, nobody wants to look at it. That's what this is all about, really, when it comes right down to it. Thornton was here last May. I just checked the minutes, and when they annexed that piece of property in their annexation proposal, they said Xcel may be coming to us for a substation site. We were aware of it, but I would guess most of you folks weren't aware of it back then. I think Xcel is negotiated in good faith. I think everybody here has agreed that it's no fun when a transformer blows and you're out of power for 4 or 5 hours. We certainly need this, and we probably need it sooner than later. I guess we could tell them to go look at a dozen other sites, and they run into the same thing. Then somebody would object to, no matter where they wanted to go. In a way, I mean, this facility is going to generate no traffic on that road. I think somebody will come in once a week or whatever they said, and just to do an inspection on it. So you're not having heavy traffic up and down the road. And it could be a lot worse with some other development out there. I've been around here almost 50 years, and the landscape is changing. I used to enjoy driving through the pristine farmland, which now is mostly covered with oil wells, oil tanks, gas pumps, that sort of thing. As far as the wildlife issues go, on other boards, I have dealt with this Department of Parks and Wildlife, and they're pretty picky. And I think if there were any kind of impacts from this proposal, I think they definitely let them know about it. So I'm in favor of allowing them to go ahead. I think the folks out in that area are lucky. Most of you have an acre of land. You've got some open space. The new developments, you don't have much open space. So I can appreciate, sympathize to a certain degree that you coming home and looking across the field and seeing some power lines, not really aesthetically pleasing, but I think, call it progress, call it whatever you want, but in a growing community, you have demands for utility, more utility services, and a lot of other services. There's more than one stoplight in town now. There's one stoplight when I arrived, so I'm in favor of the proposal.
Mr. Baker.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Mr. Sazowski. There's no dispute that this substation is needed. However, I don't think this meets the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 9 of the conditional use standards and requirements, so I'm going to vote no. Number 9 says the general compatibility of the proposed use with the area in which it is located. I don't think this meets that criteria. I'm not sure we could put this anywhere that meets these criteria, but based on what we've heard tonight and this criteria, I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, I'm not going to repeat it, but I agree with what a lot of Dr. Jones said. In a perfect world, you know, obviously it's needed. We've all said that. We all recognize that. Regardless of what side this you are on. In a perfect world, if we could move it north or northwest, you know, that would be perfect. We don't have the option to vote on that today, unfortunately. And so one thing I looked at is the setbacks. You know, we're looking at about 500 feet. If this was gas and oil, this would be approved, but it's not. And so that's one thing that I look at. So if this is something that is approved, I would be alluding to what you said earlier, Mayor, looking for, you know, something more than a chain link fence to protect the views for those to the south. So that's where I stand.
Okay. So I would offer maybe something in between. And I don't know where this puts you because we don't have Thornton here to project. But I think in order to take this vote, we need some assurances, absolute assurances about certain things that would happen. And some of these you may not be able to assure us tonight. You certainly can assure us better landscaping and better fencing. But I'm not sure that you can give any assurances about any movability of this site at all. And I don't know if that's a conversation that can be had with Thornton, and if this, for some reason, rather than a yes or no, if it could be postponed, or would we be allowed to do that, Mr. McCarver?
You could postpone it for a specific purpose, to perhaps have Thornton here to discuss from its point of view what if any alternative sites are available.
So then I might suggest that we postpone this for a period of time to allow Excel to perhaps go back to Thornton to provide them with some of this additional information that we have been able to gather tonight from the public hearing, to suggest to them or to see if you can't work out with them something that, some sort of compromise that would be better, I guess, fitting for a lot of what we've heard this evening. And that might also fit back into some of the points that Mr. Kozlowski pointed out as well.
In Your Honor, if I could, I think
Yes.
that the town could certainly intervene as well. We have contacts with the city of Thornton, so it may help if town staff maybe went with Excel and met with their staff and kind of just expressed community concerns with this location. I don't think it would hurt for us to get involved.
Right. And I think that might specifically really work because, I mean, we've heard the concerns here. You've heard the concerns. Obviously, you probably have heard them multiple times. But I think if you now know that this project lies in the fate of whether this can move forward or not, it means obviously having to maybe move forward to really work a true partnership in some kind of compromising way. Perhaps all parties could come together to look at that. Because I think the one thing that nobody questions is that we do have this need, and it's not just for new development though. That's why we don't put the onus on totally new development, because we have power outages throughout the grids in many parts of our town, in several sections of some of our oldest communities especially. So we know that we need this. We need this today. We need this for the future. But we also know that we have many citizens that we also have to take into account what their thoughts are and as well. So, Mr. Baker.
Could we also ask them, since they're at the table, a different site beyond this? I mean, moving it north maybe is not a big enough deal. Maybe we could find out why those other sites are non-negotiable.
Are you talking about Thornton, Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Okay. To me, that's what's missing in tonight's presentation is if there are alternative sites or aren't alternative sites within Thornton's control, it would have been good to have Thornton here to tell us that. And perhaps a postponement for the purpose of asking Thornton to appear here to explore alternative sites is a safer course, because it goes to the core of what Mr. Soslowski and Mr. Baker said when it comes to the suitability of the site under those first three criteria and the last one. So if we are going to entertain a postponement, I would only recommend you do that if we can be assured that Thornton has representatives here who have personal knowledge of this and can talk about that. Otherwise, I don't think the record is complete on that, and
Right.
that is a concern of mine.
But we certainly we don't know if they will be amenable to this until we reach out to them. So how do we state that motion that captures that?
Well, and let me ask you for the record, so would it be improper for staff to meet with their staff and share the concerns? Would that mess with this process at all?
It would not be improper to have staff explore that with Thornton and bring that back into a public hearing. So what you would be doing essentially is directing that a continuation of the public hearing be had before a determination is made tonight, and that the purpose of that public hearing is to hear from Thornton as to hear further evidence as to whether there is a viable alternative site. And if there isn't, then you are faced with the decision you've got tonight.
And if I may, maybe for the motion, if this hearing would be continued for 1 month until March 25th, and then if we're not making any headway with Thornton, we can't get them here, we could just update the board and they can either recontinue the hearing or make a decision then. But
So just to make the record clear, you won't take action on the matter the agenda item that you are on at this moment. You will postpone that. And you will direct staff to reconvene or to reach out to Thornton, and that a public hearing will be reopened here on the 25th of March for the purpose of hearing further evidence on alternative sites within the control of the city of Thornton.
Right. And along with the I guess we'd have to wait to see what the alternative sites are. But when we come back, I want to make sure we do have whatever those are, absolute assurances would be part of whatever we're presented with at that point in time. Again, probably it's going to depend on exactly where this lands. Is the applicant agreeable? Would this work for you if we would delay this action by 30 days, it sounds like?
In lieu of getting the project denied, I think we'd be willing to do the postponement. I don't know if there's any way to accelerate the date, whether it would be the March 25th, if there's a date we could get sooner. The spring and summer loads are coming, and you're going to see the effects of it this summer. So the sooner we started on construction, whether it be this or some other location, we need to happen immediately.
right, and I just suggest that because I think 2 weeks from now, having Thornton here and prepared to discuss it, maybe a little bit quick. So I'd rather buy a little bit of time versus come back and saying, well, let's continue it again. Maybe we have all these folks here. So I know 28 days is a lot, but I think it's a little bit more feasible to bring something back to the board.
If I may, one other comment. When we hear this again and postpone, there also is the issue, to my mind, of eminent domain. We'd love to have an agreement with Thornton where both parties agree. But I do think that the agency holds an ability to use eminent domain if necessary. I would like to know how long that might take and what it might cost. But I'd say I don't think that's a viable option for you. If it is a viable option, then I think that's on the table as well.
I would say at this point, it's not a viable option.
Well,
but
it is a viable option. If you chose to, you could pursue eminent domain.
Well, let me see if I can interrupt for a second, just to make certain that what we're talking about is postponing action on the matter that's before you right now, pending a reopened public hearing to explore the availability of alternative sites within the control of the city of Thornton. That could be by negotiation. It could be through the powers of eminent domain. But rather than getting back into whether it is or isn't viable at this stage, I don't recommend that.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Okay. So
let me see if I can
see if
recite
you can state the motion.
Assuming that Thornton or that Xcel Energy is comfortable with this, what I would ask is that we have a motion to postpone this agenda item pending a reopened public hearing on the question of whether there are alternative sites available within the control of the city of Thornton, and that public hearing be reopened in this room, 7 p.m. on March 25th.
Okay.
so moved.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion on the floor for Mr. Kozlowski and a second from Mr. Baker for postponement, as stated by Mr. McCarter, until March 25th. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the motion passes unanimously. So we'll just make sure that staff gets with Excel and works out all of the logistics on how we're going to proceed moving forward. Moving on then to item 3, resolution number 2019-18. A resolution authorizing and directing the town manager to make application to Northern Colorado Conservancy District for annually renewable perpetual water contracts for rights to use Colorado Big Thompson project water under Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 3745-131. Legislative action, Mr. Thornhill will give us presentation. Mr. Thornhill.
Thank you. Good evening. The Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District has established various rules and procedures regarding the acquisition of CBT units. So whenever the town goes out and purchases units or has units dedicated for development, the town has to abide by those rules. The first part of that is the town applies for a temporary use permit. That allows us the beneficial use of that water for that year that those units were acquired in. And then by March 1st of the following year, the town has to cancel those temporary units and apply for a permanent annually renewable perpetual water use contract under Section 131 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Because these contracts are with the public entity, they're intergovernmental agreements and require town board approval. These contracts are also perpetual so long as the town pays the annual assessments on those units. The reason why I'm standing in front of you today is the town has been doing this for quite a while, signing these contracts. As you notice in the packet that Shane had already signed these, we'd already sent them to Northern. Northern did a periodic review of our documents and found that we had an older resolution that allowed us the cancellation of the temporary use permits, but we didn't have in that resolution the acceptance of the perpetual contract with those units. So we're cleaning up that language a little bit with this resolution, and we think that covers it.
So we have not had to do this before?
No, we have not.
There are questions?
I wanted him to make clear for the record that I was told to sign them, the town manager always signed them, and in Northern, it's make you do a resolution. So I don't normally sign stuff before the board says it's okay.
Okay. Mr. Sosowski, did you have a
I'm just
question?
wondering if this is a motion to ratify the acts of our town manager.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Thornhill? If not, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move board approve resolution number 2019-18. Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Sosowski with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer approving resolution 2019-18. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4, ordinance number 2019-1583, an ordinance of the Town Board of the Town of Windsor, Colorado, approving the First Amendment to the Service Plan for the Ridge at Harmony Road Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 4, and authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the town and the districts. Second reading, Mr. McCarger is giving presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was before you on first reading over a month ago. We decided to postpone it for a while to make certain that notice was issued to some folks who, although not affected directly by it, we thought would be better notified. So that's why this has taken a while for it to come back to you for second reading. The second reading, the ordinance before you is identical to what we had before, with the exception of the dates being modified. And anticipating the next item, in case you should approve this one, is the amended intergovernmental agreement. That is authorized, a new intergovernmental agreement is authorized under the term of the ordinance that's before you on second reading. Mr. O'Leary is here on behalf of the districts. His client, Mr. Mark, is also with him. And then Carolyn Steffel, your special district counsel, is here to answer your questions. So I'm going to step out of the way. I think it's probably wise that Mr. O'Leary present first. And then if there are questions, then the two attorneys who are specialists in this field can answer them for you.
Welcome, Mr. O'Leary. Sorry for the delay.
No worries, Madam Mayor and Town Council members. My name's David O'Leary. I'm from the law firm of Spencer Fain in Denver. We're back here tonight on second reading for the consideration of the approval of a service plan amendment. This, just to refresh your memory about it, we are coming back due to a big increase in the amount of acreage, the need for additional capital improvements. The request for additional debt authorization is for all the property that does not currently have any residents. We will not affect District 2. There will be no increases in fees. There will be a cap on the debt authorization for District 2, and there is a cap on the mill levy that is consistent with the town model. A lot of the changes that have occurred both in the service plan and in the amended and restated IGA are to be consistent with your current town model. We have worked cooperatively with town staff and appreciate all the time and effort that staff and consultants have been providing. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have. But most of our memos and documents are very similar. We have made some changes to the IGA just to maintain consistency with the service plan. But other than that, we're here to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions? Okay. If there are no questions, then Mr. McCarger, did you have anything further?
The notification that went out between the last reading and this reading indicated to the public that there would be a public hearing. And so there should be an opportunity, given that this is second reading, for the public to comment on this. If there's anyone here who has questions about this or wants to talk about it, we should open that up before we take any further, before we take formal action on the ordinance, just as we would on second reading of any ordinance.
Okay.
We're on the resolution now, right?
Well, no, we switched that order this evening,
Sorry.
so we're on the ordinance.
Okay.
You need a motion to open here?
Well, no, we're not, we don't have to. I'm just
comment.
what Mr. McCarger stated, I'm just going to open this to public comment, or if anybody wanted to come before the board to speak to the board on this agenda item, this would be your opportunity.
Ruth Conley, 5898 Chantry Drive. It's hard to remember that sometimes. So I have lived at Harmony Ridge since October, and when I purchased the property there, I was told that that area was going to possibly have a school and some green space. So this is really surprising to me that that's not even being considered, and I'd like to understand where that's changed, or where it would be relocated to.
Would you like to?
May I answer for you, David? The approval of a metropolitan district, it really doesn't affect the overall development plan. It may fund public improvements that are needed for development, but it won't affect the overall appearance of the development. So if I understand the question, it has to do with what the property will look like once it's developed or won't look like, and the approval of a metropolitan district service plan doesn't necessarily affect the
We're
look
just
of development.
approving how the organization operates and how it collects money and how it distributes it back out.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with the project? Okay.
It doesn't have anything to do with what is going to be in the project or not in the project, but we happen to have the developer here this evening who we can bring forward, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer that question for you. Would you not, Mr. Marks?
Yes, Jeff Mark with the Landhouse Company. I reside at 519 Prospect Drive, Castle Rock, Colorado. Yes, as part of the overall 400 plus acres, we are on the last, as far as the last plat, which is District 3, filing number 2, not to get confusing, but we did dedicate, or in the process of dedicating, a 10-acre school site, and also dedicated an approximate 5-acre park site to the town of Windsor. All the other common areas as far as landscape, which our Metro District and us as developer have installed, are pursuant to the approved plans through town staff. And by the way, after the meeting, I'd be happy to stick around and answer any questions that she or anybody else might have.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Okay, if not, then I think we would be open for a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1583.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson approving ordinance 2019-1583. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, resolution number 2019-19. A resolution approving an amended and restated intergovernmental agreement between the town of Windsor and the Ridge at Harmony Road Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 4 and authorizing the mayor to execute the same. Legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
This is a companion item to the last item. The last item authorized the execution of an amended intergovernmental agreement. The amended intergovernmental agreement is before you in this agenda item. It has been received or reviewed by your special district council. I have looked at it. All of the changes recommended by Ms. Steffel have been made by Mr. O'Leary, and I'm here recommending that you approve the amended and restated IGA.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. McCarter?
Just a comment, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just wanting to point out to our town manager that the author is authorizing the mayor to execute the same. See how that works?
Oh, you're saying that she didn't sign it beforehand?
I
guess
That's only because no one asked her.
Yeah, that's a stylistic difference, I think, then.
I got a few things I'd like you to sign later on.
Okay, so with that, we do have a resolution. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2019-19.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson, approving the resolution for number 2019-19. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 6, economic development update from Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and town board members. I apologize. This is going to be a little bit longer of a report this evening, Due to the sensitivity of time and how late we're running, I will try to be as quick as possible. So I do have a couple documents for you that I'll pass out, and a copy for Crystal as well. So kind of wanted to take a step back because there seems to be, I'd like to give a better discussion and kind of an overall conversation about the Economic Development Department and functionality and what we do. So when we talk a little bit about why we created this department, in 2009 the community had formed a committee to actually look into what they wanted for Windsor and what they wanted this to be. And the end conclusion basically was they wanted a voice for economic development. What that looked like, they didn't really know. But again, in 2010, we had a State of Colorado Economic Development Assessment, and that was identified several functionalities: to have a voice for economic development, create a URA, create a downtown area, those different functionalities. And then the final form was in 2011, they created an economic development task force that was made up of elected officials, community leaders, staff, and everybody that came together that kind of said, what do you want for Windsor? And again, it was an economic development voice, a department, a direction for us to get involved with economic development. So that task force again was started in January of 2011. I started April 1st of 2011. So I worked with a consultant that was hired, and we worked with the existing committee to focus on what should this department do and what should it be made up of and how should it operate. So with that, we came up with three main priorities for the department. We're going to focus on primary employment, which is attracting and retaining business retention expansion, so working with the existing industry that we have, trying to get them to grow, and then doing new attraction of primary employment. Again, primary employers are anybody who exports more than 50% of their goods or services outside of the region. So it can be a company of 1 or a company of 1,000, it doesn't matter, that's the definition in economic development standard. The second function and priority of this office was to focus on retail, so we attract and retain retail in Windsor. And then the third, and I think most critical role, is the business ombudsman or business advocate. That, I think, has landed us probably more deals in Windsor with our advocacy, not because of the complication with working with other departments, but the communication is difficult when you have companies that are trying to work through a process that they've never been before. So we sit in and stand up, and we really actually are on the side of the business through any municipal process that they go through. And then I've also been known on to work on people like Comcast or CenturyLink or different entities like that, helping to try to resolve issues that companies have in either getting service, speed to market, getting their doors open. That is our functionality. That is a third of what we do in this office, and it's a high priority. I would say we are winning in the region because we are probably one of the only ones that specifically focuses and touts on having a business ombudsman or advocate, both on what Jill focuses on business retention and expansion, and then I focus on business attraction. So when we work on those things, that is a priority for us, and we work greatly. It does put us at a point of contention with other departments sometimes. They're gracious enough to put up with us. I will say that numerous occasions that, I question or ask questions in meetings that look like I'm not knowing what's going on. It's because I'm reading that client and understanding they aren't understanding what's going on. So I'll take one and say, could you explain that to me so we can make sure that the clients understand? And it's not just our departments, it happens with the fire department, with Safe Built too, just making sure that that clear line of communication is open so people understand what's expected of them as they move through our process. So just wanted to give you kind of a real big overview of that again. We do have just a staff of 2 now, so other economic development functions that are important, but we just can't take the lead on are tourism, small business functions such as business plan writing, startups, entrepreneurialism, and legislative items. We have partners that are already in place to handle those, or we partner with specific entities that deal with those. Our economic development partners start at the state level, so the state has an Office of Economic Development and International Trade. We just met with Betsy Markey, who's the new director of that office. We also partner with Metro Denver EDC. We have a code of ethics that we've signed with both Metro Denver EDC as well as Larimer-Weld County that says we don't rob Peter to pay Paul, basically. So we don't go in and steal companies from other communities. We don't incentivize companies from one community to another. We just don't do that. That's how we all operate. Unless a company is coming to our area where they're making a large advancement and they're growing and expanding, they're adding jobs, they're adding equipment, they're adding physical square footage, they're buying a building, we don't incentivize those companies, and they're told that all day long. And I'm going to do a better job of trying to communicate per some suggestions about companies that we aren't, or just in generality, companies that have asked for incentives that we have not provided them, because I know you see me come and ask for incentives for companies all the time, but you don't necessarily see the ones that I turn away. So, and just to let you know too, that economic development incentives, they are almost always requested at every single meeting that I have with every single company, regardless of the size. So they're always talked about, they're always asked about, they're always requested, and that's for everybody, pretty much all across the United States and in Colorado as a whole. So kind of getting on to the economic development activity, what we've been doing in our office. Since the last report that I gave you, which was at the end of October, we've had one big groundbreaking for Come and Go Fresh Market. We've met several times with the state and on NCRTA issues. We went and met with the State Economic Development Commission for that. I've been working on the Ranch Master Plan. That was finalized and came out. Commercial Real Estate for Women had a conference. It was an amazing conference that they paid for me to go to, which was really amazing. I'm on their board of directors, so really good opportunity to get networked with real estate folks across the United States. We went to the EDCC annual conference. That's our annual conference that we focus on. And then we had the Larimer County Weld Marketing Plan that I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we had the State Demographer Summit. So we had some functionality that we came together when we talked about working regionally, and I'm going to pass this out to you because it's really difficult to see. But this is really the joint marketing of the regional assets that we have in our area. So I'm not going to bore you with the details and read you all the little things that are on there, but just so you know, we are working regionally, both Larimer and Weld County, to market all the assets as a whole, because when companies try to come here, they don't necessarily look or care about county lines or city lines. So we want to make sure that we are touting Northern Colorado as a whole, because we really are our own market up here. We're not part of Metro Denver, we're not Colorado Springs. So these are the four main talking points that we've come together to kind of agree upon about what's really important in the community in the Northern Colorado as a whole. And these are our assets that will work together to sell as a whole. I'm also, Crystal's passing through the prospect report. So year to date through the end, we had 117 prospects. For the year, we have about 89 active. Now that the new year has started, I'll purge all those. I save all the data, but we purge them and we'll start fresh again. We still have 2 from 2016, believe it or not, we're working on, and 2 from 2000, I believe that should be 17, I apologize. 29 prospect visits. So we had in 2018, we had 13 company announcements. There were more companies that came here. These are just ones that specifically Jill and I worked with very closely and helped to expand or locate here. Jill did 88 business visits. We had 102 miscellaneous company assists, meaning we had questions about different things that we've either referred or answered them to, but they wouldn't qualify as a prospect looking to come here or expand here. And then we went to or attended or participated in 233 community outreach and events throughout the year. So we talk about prospect activity by type. Again, 60% is industrial. That's just what we're seeing right now. That's the large amount of prospects that we're getting in. By industry, manufacturing, 27% is number one. And excuse me, second is retail at 26%. Lead source, where we're getting our leads from. As you can see, the company is still the number one lead source at 34%, which is great. We have that great connection to companies out there, and they're hearing about us and coming to us directly, or even through internal sources. Planning department's great at sending people up to us as well. 24% come as the next largest source is upstate Colorado. They're our economic development partner that serve all of Weld County. Real estate request, they're looking for existing space. 49%. So almost half of the prospects that we get are looking for some sort of existing space in town. And that existing space is under 10,000 square feet. We've seen a large surge to about 5,000 is the special mark that people are looking for right now for some reason. That seems to be the actual focus is about 5,000 square feet, but overall the majority are 10 or under. The good news is we've shifted back, and in 2018, the majority of the people want to own, which is always good. It's good that they're making an investment in our community. It means they can't be bought, they can't be moved to another state or taken out of our area. When they make a commitment, typically those companies buy it. They're more likely to stay committed to that area. So that is not the case in 2017. Is the prior year we had a shift and more people wanted to lease their business or their space rather than own. So it's good that at least the majority still want to own. We had 15 of those prospect leads that came in that we just didn't even qualify for, and that was because they were looking for existing space, and most of it was existing industrial with ware yard, or it was 40,000 square feet, 150,000 square feet for existing space. We don't have that, and nobody in Colorado really does right now. Again, Jill for Business Retention Expansion had 88 company visits in 2018, and she's currently working on 4 different expansion projects in one form or another. Some of them have been delayed, so we'll see how those come out. Year over year, here's the prospect trend. 2017, you could see, was kind of our banner year, but we had a pretty decent year in 2018 at 117 prospects. Sorry, I rambled through that really quickly, and I'll be glad to meet with any of you offline as well, but just wanted to open it up to see if anybody had any questions.
Any questions?
Well, and also and I'm going to try to cut you off, Mr. Sosowski, but I do want to remind everybody that we do have Stacy scheduled for an upcoming work session to really talk a little bit more in depth as far as how we do economic development. I think some of her earlier slides and having that conversation. So please have your comments, but also know that this is not the only crack you get at this lady. You've got her back.
I'm coming back.
In a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yes.
The 88 visits, were those all just Windsor businesses?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, since you're an ombudsman, something I heard today, did you know that Bank of Colorado is having consistently significant problems with their service provider, which is CenturyLink? Like this morning, they had no phone service and they couldn't access their computers, and that's like the 3rd or 4th time.
Yep. Nope, I did not, but I will get Jill on it right first thing in the morning. Thank you.
So, and especially maybe as we are renegotiating, they can't get Comcast apparently, which is why they're stuck with CenturyLink. So maybe even as we are, and I think that whole mall back there is on CenturyLink, which doesn't make sense to me, because it's like, you would think Comcast is surrounding them, but I think we need to maybe even consider that as we're renegotiating our Comcast agreement.
Absolutely what we need to know about.
Really look at that and see, because that seems kind of ridiculous that we've got some key businesses right there and they don't have a dependable service provider, apparently.
Right, Mayor. So Ian McCarger and I met with your other special appointed counsel who's going to renegotiate that agreement. And our first step is going to be to have a special meeting with the board, so you can meet with him in executive session and really kind of go through the board's priorities and what you'd like to see this franchise achieve. So that's a great topic.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for all you do. You ladies work hard in that office.
And David, I'm sorry, did you have something?
I'll wait till the future meeting.
You wait, yeah, so we have her on March 18th, so.
Thank you very much.
So moving on then to communications from town attorney.
Just one. The Downtown Development Authority, as you know, approved the agreement, the letter of intent, exclusive negotiating agreement with Brinkman, and that is going to come back to you on March 11th. So Brinkman was okay with waiting until March 11th for us to handle review and potential approval of that term sheet exclusive negotiating agreement, but they wanted at least one of you to approve it so that they could go forward with their transaction today. I was not able to confirm whether the transaction for the alternative location for the Legion had been approved or had closed, but we'll look into that and we'll let you know. Either Shane and I will let you know that tomorrow.
Mary, do you know?
I haven't gotten any word, but I'm guessing it did. So I didn't hear otherwise.
I think we would have heard if it hadn't. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking.
And there
it did.
was no room for any additional time, because Brinkman did ask for that, and the landowner came back and said, if you delay this, we're selling it to another party. We have somebody else lined up.
So that, we'll look into that and we'll let you know, but the exclusive negotiating agreement with Brinkman and the DDA will be back before you in 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Communications from town staff, Mr. Ballstead? Mr. Lucas? Chief? Okay. Communications from town manager?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Communications from town board?
Just a quick question. I saw the thank you letter from UNC. What did go to the town?
I think that comes, that's because, does that not come out of your office, Stacy?
Right.
We had a thank you for our support from the SVDC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that comes from Stacy's office.
Yeah, our 5,000.
Okay, thank you.
So, so if there, I just have something to communicate. So, this weekend, the town tragically lost 2 lifetime Windsorrites, Sandy Brugge and Carrie Ann Lucas. This is a great loss to the community because these 2 women truly exemplified real courage. They overcame extreme obstacles with their physical health and needs. They were truly and very intrinsic in their love of this town, and they really had great and showed leadership on the boards they served. Carrie Ann Lucas served as the chair for Historic Preservation Committee, and Sandy Brugge was the most current president for the Windsor Severance Historical Society. So they led their lives and they volunteered countless and countless of hours for everything they participated in. So we just wanted to give recognition to both of these women that we lost over the weekend this week. And with that, if there's nothing further to add, I would just seek a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker to adjourn. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you.
And I just heard Brinkman did close today. They closed this afternoon, so
Excellent.
the speed of decisions.